3 days ago, a silver dealer in Tokyo opened his shop at 6 a.m. like he has for the past 19 years. By 6:47 a.m., he had sold everything, every coin, every bar, every gram of inventory he had taken 3 months to accumulate, gone in 47 minutes. He turned away 200 customers that day. Some had traveled hours by train. One woman offered him double his asking price for metal he no longer possessed. He bowed and apologized. She did not leave. She stood outside his empty display case for 20 minutes, staring at the velvet where silver used to sit. That dealer was not selling silver at the price you see on your trading app right now. He was selling at the equivalent of $130 per ounce. The official spot price that morning was $71. He charged almost double and still ran out before breakfast. This is not happening in one shop. This is not happening in one city. Across Asia, across the Middle East, across every physical silver market on this planet, the same scene is playing out with different faces and different languages, but identical outcomes. Metal is vanishing. Buyers are being turned away. And the prices people actually pay to hold real silver in their hands have completely disconnected from the numbers flashing on trading screens in New York and London. Here is what should disturb you. The financial news you consumed this morning told you silver closed at around $90 per ounce. That number came from a futures exchange where contracts trade, paper promises, digital entries in a database. Meanwhile, in the physical world where actual metal changes hands, in Seoul, buyers pay premiums that push the real cost above $100. In Shanghai, premiums hit $8 above the Western spot price. In Dubai, 1-ounce coins that should cost $90 based on official pricing actually sell for north of $120. This gap between what the screen says and what the street pays has never been this wide. Not during the 2008 financial crisis, not during the 2020 pandemic panic, not during any market stress event in modern history. Something broke. And I do not mean broke in the sense of a temporary malfunction that technicians are working to repair. I mean broke in the sense that the fundamental mechanism connecting paper silver to physical silver has shattered, and the people running the system have no idea how to put it back together. What I am about to walk you through over the next 30 minutes will explain exactly how we arrived at this moment, who engineered it, who is profiting from it, and why the silver sitting in your safe or the silver you have been thinking about buying represents something far more significant than a simple investment. Stay with me. This is going to require your full attention. Pull up your phone right now. Open whatever app you use to check commodity prices. Find silver. You will see a number somewhere around $90 per ounce. Maybe 91, maybe 89. It fluctuates by the minute based on trades happening on exchanges in New York and London. That number is a fiction. I need you to understand what I mean by that, because this is the foundation of everything else I'm going to tell you. The price you see quoted for silver does not represent what silver actually costs. It represents what paper contracts tied to silver trade for on a futures exchange. These are two completely different things, and for most of market history, they move together closely enough that nobody bothered to distinguish between them. That relationship has now collapsed. Let me show you what the real silver market looks like as of this week. In Japan, physical silver coins and bars sell for the equivalent of $130 per ounce. That is not a typo. $130. Buyers line up before dawn outside bullion dealers in Tokyo's Ginza district. The shops that still have inventory sell out within hours of opening. The ones that ran out of stock weeks ago have simply stopped posting hours. There is nothing to sell. In South Korea, secondary market prices for 1 kilogram bars have pushed past $103 per ounce. These are not collector premiums for rare coins. These are premiums for basic bullion that should theoretically be available at spot price, plus a small dealer markup. In Shanghai, physical silver trades at $8 per ounce above the Western paper price. Chinese buyers offer foreign suppliers these premiums and still cannot secure enough metal. Refiners are backed up. Shipping is constrained. The metal that does arrive gets absorbed instantly. In Dubai, 1-ounce silver coins from recognized mints like Pamp Suisse sell for prices that work out to $128 per ounce. The posted spot price when those sales occurred was $72. In India, buyers offer $5 premiums above international prices, and even that is not enough to pull metal into the country fast enough to meet demand. 44 silver trading firms in the city of Rajkot declared insolvency in recent weeks. Their combined liabilities approached $425 million. These were not speculators betting on price direction. These were established trading houses that got caught holding paper promises when the market demanded physical metal. Do you see the pattern? The official price says one thing. The street price says something completely different. And this is not a minor discrepancy. This is a $50 to $60 gap between paper and physical. This is an 80% premium in some markets. This has never happened before at this scale. Let me explain why this matters. The silver market operates on a system of trust. Futures exchanges like COMEX in New York function as the global price discovery mechanism. Miners, refiners, industrial users, and investors all reference COMEX prices when they negotiate real-world transactions. The system works because everyone assumes that a futures contract can ultimately be converted into physical metal. If you hold a contract for 5,000 ounces of silver, you theoretically have the right to demand delivery of 5,000 actual ounces from an exchange-approved warehouse. This assumption is what links paper to physical. This assumption is what allows a futures price to serve as a meaningful benchmark. The assumption is now being tested, and it is failing. Here's the number that should keep you awake tonight. For every single ounce of physical silver sitting in COMEX-approved warehouses available for delivery, there are 356 ounces worth of paper claims trading in the market. 356 to 1. That ratio means the system functions only as long as the vast majority of contract holders never actually demand their metal. As long as traders are content to settle in cash, to roll their contracts forward, to treat silver as an abstract number rather than a physical substance, the game continues. But what happens when even a small fraction of those paper holders decide they want real metal? What happens when industrial users who need silver for manufacturing stop trusting the paper market and start demanding physical delivery? What happens when investors watch premiums explode in Asia and realize that holding a futures contract is not the same as holding actual silver? The answer is what we are witnessing right now. The COMEX reported that registered silver inventory, meaning metal actually available for delivery against futures contracts, has crashed by more than 70% since 2020. What remains is approximately 127 million ounces. That sounds like a large number until you consider the scale of claims against it. In the first week of January 2026, market trackers reported that roughly 47 million ounces of silver was claimed from COMEX warehouses in just 4 trading days. That represents more than a third of available supply draining in less than a week. The exchange responded the way exchanges always respond when they are losing control of a market. They raised margin requirements. On January 7th, CME Group announced that silver maintenance margins would increase to $32,500 per contract. That is a 47% jump. Translation? They are making it dramatically more expensive to hold silver positions because they need to reduce the number of contracts outstanding before too many people demand delivery. This is not a sign of a healthy market. This is a sign of an exchange scrambling to manage a situation that is spiraling beyond their control. One analyst described the margin hikes as the exchange pulling the kill switch. They are changing the rules because they are losing. And here is the detail that should alarm you most. Traders have started doing something unusual. Normally, when you hold a futures contract approaching expiration, you roll it forward to the next contract month. You exchange your January contract for a March contract. This is standard practice for anyone who wants continued exposure to silver without taking physical delivery. In the first week of January, the opposite started happening. Open interest in January contracts surged by over 1,400 contracts, while March open interest dropped by nearly 3,000. Traders are rolling backward. They are moving from later delivery dates to earlier delivery dates. There's only one logical explanation for this behavior. These traders do not want to wait until March. They want their metal now. They do not trust that metal will be available in 2 months. They're accelerating their delivery demands because they believe waiting is more dangerous than paying the costs of early settlement. When futures traders start racing to take delivery ahead of schedule, it signals a profound loss of confidence in the system's ability to function normally. The paper price on your screen is not a lie because someone is deliberately falsifying numbers. It is a lie because it no longer reflects what silver actually costs in the physical world. It is a legacy readout from a system that worked for decades but has now entered a failure state. And the gap between paper and physical is not shrinking. It is widening by the day. The question you should be asking is simple. How did we get here? The answer begins with something that happened on January 1st, 2026. While you were counting down to midnight on New Year's Eve, while fireworks exploded over cities around the world and champagne corks popped, a document published on a Chinese government website quietly rewrote the rules of global commodity markets. Most people missed it entirely. The announcement came from the Ministry of Commerce in Beijing, bureaucratic language, dense regulatory text. The kind of document that gets filed away and ignored by anyone without a specific reason to care. But buried in that document was a decision that sent shockwaves through every trading desk, every manufacturing floor, and every military procurement office in the Western world. Starting January 1st, 2026, China began enforcing strict new export controls on refined silver. Let me explain exactly what this means. Under the previous system, Chinese silver refiners and traders could export metal to global markets with relatively few restrictions. China processes enormous quantities of silver. Their smelters and refineries handle ore shipped from mines on every continent. They have spent decades building the infrastructure to dominate this part of the supply chain. As of New Year's Day, that changed. Now, any Chinese company that wants to export silver must first obtain a special license from the government. To qualify for that license, companies must meet two conditions. First, they need an annual production capacity of at least 80 tons of silver. Second, they must demonstrate sufficient credit lines and financial stability to satisfy government reviewers. These requirements sound technical. They sound like reasonable quality controls. In practice, they are a filter designed to block the vast majority of Chinese silver from leaving the country. The government released a list of approved exporters. 44 companies made the cut. 44 out of hundreds of firms that previously participated in the export trade. Everyone else is now locked out. Think about what this means for global supply. China controls between 60 and 70% of the world's refined silver. Their refineries process raw material from Mexico, from Peru, from Australia, from everywhere. The metal enters China as ore or concentrate, gets refined into pure silver, and then flows back out to manufacturers and investors worldwide. That flow just got choked down to a fraction of its previous volume. Even the companies on the approved list faced new friction. Every shipment requires paperwork. Every export needs government sign-off. Delays that used to be measured in days can now stretch into weeks or months, depending on bureaucratic priorities. And here's the part that matters most. The Chinese government did not frame this as a temporary measure. The regulations cover 2026 and 2027. This is the new normal. This is how silver exports from China will work for at least the next 2 years, and likely far longer. A state-run Chinese newspaper published an analysis shortly after the announcement. An unnamed industry insider was quoted, saying the new policy formally elevates silver from an ordinary commodity to a strategic material. Its export controls now sit on the same regulatory footing as rare earth elements. If you followed what China did with rare earths over the past 15 years, that comparison should make your stomach drop. Rare earths are a group of minerals essential for manufacturing everything from smartphones to wind turbines to military guidance systems. China dominates rare earth production the same way it dominates silver refining. In the 2010s, Beijing began tightening export quotas on rare earths, creating artificial scarcity that sent prices skyrocketing and left Western manufacturers scrambling for alternatives. The strategy worked. China used its control over rare earth supply to extract economic concessions, force technology transfers, and strengthen its position in global negotiations. Other countries talked about developing alternative supply chains. Some made progress. But more than a decade later, China still controls the market. Now they are applying the same playbook to silver. Elon Musk responded publicly within days of the announcement. On his social media platform, he wrote that the restrictions are not good. Silver is needed in many industrial processes. He understands what many casual observers miss. This is not about trade policy in the abstract. This is about physical inputs that factories need to operate. Tesla uses silver in every vehicle it produces. The metal goes into electrical contacts, battery management systems, and the electronics that control everything from climate systems to autopilot functions. A standard electric vehicle contains somewhere between 25 and 50 grams of silver. That adds up fast when you are manufacturing millions of cars per year. But Musk's concern extends beyond his own company. He sees the broader picture. Silver flows into solar panels, into semiconductors, into medical devices, into the infrastructure that powers artificial intelligence. Restricting that flow does not just raise costs. It threatens the physical ability of Western industry to function. The timing of China's announcement was not accidental. 2 months earlier, in November 2025, the United States Geological Survey added silver to its official list of critical minerals. This designation acknowledges that silver is essential to national security and economic stability. It triggers additional government attention to supply chain vulnerabilities. Beijing watched Washington declare silver critical and responded by demonstrating exactly how vulnerable that supply chain actually is. The message could not be clearer. You need this metal. We control it. Negotiate accordingly. And silver was not the only target. The same January 1st regulations also tightened controls on tungsten and antimony. Tungsten is used in aerospace manufacturing, electronics, and armor-piercing ammunition. Antimony goes into flame retardants, batteries, and military applications. China dominates production of both. This is coordinated resource warfare. China is systematically locking down the materials that advanced economies require for everything from green energy transitions to national defense. The European Union Chamber of Commerce conducted a survey of its members in late 2025. A majority of respondents reported they have already been affected by Chinese export controls or expect to be affected in the near future. These are not speculative concerns. These are companies watching their supply chains fracture in real time. What happens when 60 to 70% of global refined silver supply suddenly becomes harder to access? Prices rise, obviously, but the effects go deeper than that. When supply gets constrained, buyers start competing more aggressively for what remains available. Industrial users who need silver to keep production lines running will pay almost any premium to secure metal. They cannot simply wait for prices to normalize. They have contracts to fulfill, employees to pay, customers to serve. This creates what economists call inelastic demand. The buyers keep buying regardless of price because they have no alternative. They need the silver the way you need oxygen. Telling them to use less is not a realistic option. Meanwhile, the remaining supply outside China becomes the focus of intense competition. Mexican miners, Peruvian producers, and recyclers who recover silver from industrial scrap all find themselves courted by desperate buyers waving cash. But here is the problem. There is not enough silver outside China to meet global demand even before you account for the export restrictions. The market was already in deficit. Supply was already falling short of consumption. China's move did not create a shortage. It transformed an existing shortage into an acute crisis. The numbers tell the story. In 2025, global silver demand reached an estimated 1.24 billion ounces. Total supply from mining and recycling combined amounted to roughly 1 billion ounces. That is a deficit of over 230 million ounces. That gap equals the entire annual output of Mexico, the world's largest silver-producing nation. This was the 5th consecutive year of structural deficit, 5 years of consuming more silver than the world produces. 5 years of drawing down inventories and above-ground stockpiles to bridge the gap. China's export restrictions landed on a market that was already bleeding. They did not cause a small wound. They severed an artery. If Chinese exports drop by 50% from previous levels, analysts project global deficits could exceed 5,000 metric tons annually. That is a number so large it becomes almost meaningless without context. Here is the context. At that deficit rate, the remaining silver inventories in Western vaults drain to zero within a few years, not decades, years. The buffer disappears. The system that allowed paper markets to function by assuming metal would always be available somewhere loses its foundation. And once that foundation cracks, the price discovery mechanism fails completely. The spot price quoted on exchanges becomes disconnected from physical reality, which is exactly what we are already witnessing in markets across Asia and the Middle East. China did not cause the silver crisis. The crisis was building for years through a combination of factors I will explain shortly. But China made a calculated decision to accelerate the timeline and position themselves to benefit from the chaos. They are keeping their silver inside their borders. Their domestic manufacturers get priority access. Their solar panel industry, their electric vehicle industry, their electronics sector, all of it continues operating while Western competitors scramble for scraps. This is economic warfare conducted through commodity control, and most people in the West have no idea it is even happening. The announcements do not make front-page news. The mechanisms are too complex for a 30-second television segment. Politicians who should be sounding alarms are too busy with other priorities to notice the ground shifting beneath the industrial economy. But the traders notice. The manufacturers notice. The military procurement officers who need silver for guidance systems and communications equipment absolutely notice. And the smart money noticed years ago. To understand what is happening right now, you need to understand how the silver market actually works, not the simplified version. The real mechanics that determine whether prices rise or fall and whether physical metal actually changes hands. Most people think commodity markets function like a grocery store. Buyers show up with money. Sellers show up with product. They agree on a price. Transaction complete. The silver market works nothing like that. The vast majority of silver trading happens through futures contracts on exchanges like COMEX in New York and the London Bullion Market Association in the UK. A futures contract is a standardized agreement to buy or sell a specific quantity of silver at a predetermined price on a future date. One COMEX silver contract covers 5,000 ounces. When you buy that contract, you're not buying silver, you're buying the right to take delivery of silver at some point in the future. The key word is right. You can exercise it. Or you can sell the contract before expiration and never touch physical metal at all. Here is where things get interesting. The overwhelming majority of futures contracts never result in physical delivery. Traders buy contracts, watch the price move, then sell before expiration to capture profits or cut losses. The metal stays in warehouses. The contracts change hands. Cash settles the difference. This creates a situation where paper trading volume vastly exceeds physical supply. On any given day, contracts representing hundreds of millions of ounces trade back and forth, while actual warehouse inventories measure in the tens of millions. The system functions as long as everyone plays along. As long as traders treat futures as financial instruments rather than claims on real metal, the relatively small pool of physical silver can support an enormous volume of paper trading. But the system contains a fatal vulnerability. What happens when traders stop playing along? What happens when contract holders actually demand their metal? The answer depends on a single number, the ratio between paper claims and physical supply. As of early 2026, that ratio stands at approximately 356 to 1. Let me say that again so it registers. For every single ounce of physical silver available for delivery in COMEX-approved warehouses, there are 356 ounces worth of paper contracts trading in the market. 356 paper claims. 1 real ounce to satisfy them. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not speculation. This ratio is derived from publicly available data on open interest and registered inventory. Anyone with a spreadsheet and access to exchange reports can calculate it. The ratio exists because the system was never designed to handle mass delivery requests. Futures exchanges function as hedging and speculation venues, not as physical metal distributors. The small inventory exists mainly to facilitate the occasional delivery from traders with specific commercial needs. For decades, this arrangement worked fine. Industrial users who actually needed metal typically bought from refiners and dealers rather than taking COMEX delivery. Speculators had no interest in storing physical silver. The futures market remained a paper game with a thin physical backing that nobody tested seriously. That era is ending. Look at what has happened to COMEX registered inventory since 2020. Registered inventory is the category that matters. This is metal that has been warranted for delivery against futures contracts. It sits in approved vaults with documentation confirming it meets exchange specifications. When a contract holder demands delivery, registered inventory is what they receive. In 2020, COMEX registered silver inventory stood at comfortable levels. Since then, it has collapsed by more than 70%. The drawdown has accelerated in recent months as prices surged and delivery demands increased. As of early January 2026, registered inventory sits around 127 million ounces. That sounds substantial until you do some simple math. The exchange currently has contracts outstanding covering several 100 million ounces of silver. If even a modest percentage of those contract holders demand physical delivery simultaneously, the registered inventory vanishes instantly. This is not hypothetical. This is already happening. In the first 4 trading days of January 2026, approximately 47 million ounces of silver was claimed from COMEX warehouses. That represents more than a third of registered inventory draining in less than 1 week. At that rate, the remaining inventory disappears in a matter of days, not weeks or months. The exchange operators understand the danger. They can see the same numbers anyone else can see. And they have one primary tool to manage the situation: margin requirements. Margin is the cash deposit traders must post to hold futures positions. It functions as collateral against potential losses. If prices move against your position, you must add more margin or face liquidation. When exchanges want to reduce speculative activity, they raise margins. Higher margins mean traders need more capital to maintain positions. Smaller players get squeezed out. Open interest declines. Delivery pressure eases. On January 7th, 2026, CME Group announced a 47% increase in silver maintenance margins. The new requirement is $32,500 per contract. That is not a subtle adjustment. That is an emergency measure designed to shake out leveraged traders before they demand metal the exchange cannot provide. The official explanation cited volatility, standard procedure during turbulent markets. Nothing to see here. The timing tells a different story. Margin hikes of this magnitude do not happen randomly. They happen when exchange operators look at their inventory reports, look at their delivery queues, and realize they are running out of runway. One market analyst called the margin increases a kill switch. The exchange is changing the rules because the current rules lead to an outcome they cannot survive. If too many traders stand for delivery, the system breaks. Raising margins is an attempt to prevent that breaking point from arriving. But margin hikes have limits. They can slow the bleeding. They cannot stop it. Here is why. The traders demanding delivery are not retail speculators playing with borrowed money. Many of them are industrial users, institutional investors, and sovereign wealth funds with deep pockets and genuine need for physical metal. Raising margins does not faze buyers who were never leveraged in the first place. A manufacturing company that needs silver for solar panel production does not care if margins double or triple. They need the metal to operate their factories. They will pay whatever it costs to secure supply because the alternative is shutting down production lines. This creates a ratchet effect. Margin hikes push out weak hands. Strong hands remain. The remaining traders are exactly the ones most likely to demand physical delivery because they actually need the metal rather than just speculating on price movements. Each margin increase concentrates the market further into the hands of serious buyers. Each concentration increases the probability of delivery demands. The tool designed to relieve pressure eventually makes pressure worse. Now look at what traders are actually doing with their contracts. Under normal conditions, futures traders roll their positions forward as contracts approach expiration. If you hold a January contract and want to maintain silver exposure, you sell your January position and buy a March position. This is standard practice. It avoids the hassle of taking delivery while preserving your market exposure. In the first week of January 2026, open interest data revealed something unusual. Open interest in January contracts increased by over 1,400 contracts. Meanwhile, open interest in March contracts dropped by nearly 3,000. Traders are rolling backward instead of forward. And this makes no sense under normal circumstances. January contracts expire sooner. March contracts give you more time. Rolling backward means accepting earlier delivery obligations rather than pushing them out. There is only one logical explanation. These traders want their metal now. They do not trust that metal will be available in March. They are pulling delivery forward because they believe waiting is more dangerous than taking possession immediately. When futures traders start racing to accelerate delivery, it signals a fundamental loss of confidence in the system. They no longer trust that the metal will be there when they need it. They want to grab what remains before someone else takes it. This behavior creates a self-reinforcing spiral. Backward rolls drain registered inventory faster. Faster draining increases urgency among remaining contract holders. Increased urgency produces more backward rolls. More backward rolls accelerate the drain further. The spiral continues until one of two things happens. Either inventory stabilizes through some external intervention, or inventory hits zero and the exchange faces a delivery failure. We are watching this spiral unfold in real time. Some observers believe the exchange will never actually run out of metal. They point to eligible inventory, which is silver held in COMEX vaults that has not been warranted for delivery. Theoretically, eligible inventory can be converted to registered inventory if holders choose to make it available. This argument misses the point. Eligible inventory belongs to someone. Banks, funds, industrial users, and private holders store silver in COMEX vaults for their own purposes. Just because metal sits in an exchange-approved facility does not mean the owner wants to sell it or deliver it against someone else. It's futures contract. Converting eligible to registered requires convincing those owners to part with their metal. In a shortage environment with prices rising rapidly, convincing holders to sell becomes increasingly difficult. Why would you give up physical silver when every indicator suggests it will be worth dramatically more in the near future? The same logic applies to the London market. The London Bullion Market Association operates a parallel system with its own vaults and its own inventory challenges. Metal can theoretically flow between London and New York to relieve pressure in either market. In practice, that flow has become increasingly constrained. Shipping silver internationally requires secure transport, insurance, and time. Armored carriers like Brinks and Loomis have limited capacity. Booking space on secure cargo flights requires advanced planning. Insurance costs for valuable metal shipments have exploded, particularly for routes that pass through conflict zones or high-risk areas. The logistics chain that normally arbitrages price differences between markets has seized up. Even when metal exists somewhere in the world, moving it to where buyers need it faces mounting obstacles. The system is fracturing into isolated pools. London silver serves London buyers. COMEX silver serves New York buyers. Shanghai operates on its own terms. Each pool prices silver based on local supply and demand rather than global benchmarks. This fragmentation explains the premium divergence we discussed earlier. Tokyo dealers charge $130 because they cannot easily import metal from New York to undercut that price. The arbitrage mechanism that normally equalizes prices across markets has broken down. What you are watching is the slow-motion collapse of a paper-based pricing system that functioned for decades but was never stress-tested against genuine physical demand. The stress test is happening now, and the results are not encouraging for anyone who trusted paper promises over physical metal. You might be thinking this is a temporary problem. Markets get tight sometimes, prices spike, then new supply comes online, demand adjusts, and everything returns to normal. That is not what is happening here. The silver shortage is not a blip. It is not a disruption that will resolve in a few quarters. It is a structural condition that has been building for years and is now reaching a point where the math simply stops working. Let me walk you through the numbers. In 2024, global silver demand reached 1.2 billion ounces. That was a record. Industrial consumption alone hit 680 million ounces, the highest figure ever recorded. When you add investment demand, jewelry, silverware, and other uses, total demand far exceeded what the world produced. Global mine production that year came in around 835 million ounces. Recycling contributed another 180 million or so. Total supply, roughly 1 billion ounces. Total demand, 1.2 billion ounces. That is a deficit of approximately 200 million ounces in a single year. And 2024 was not an outlier. It was the fourth consecutive year of structural deficit. 2025 became the fifth. The cumulative shortfall from 2021 through 2025 adds up to approximately 820 million ounces. Where did that missing silver come from? It came from above-ground inventories. Stockpiles accumulated over previous decades. Metal sitting in vaults, in ETFs, and private holdings. The market bridged the gap between supply and demand by drawing down reserves that took generations to build. Those reserves are not infinite. Every year of deficit depletes them further. Every ounce consumed is an ounce that no longer exists in storage. The London Bullion Market Association reported that vault holdings fell by over 510 million ounces from their 2021 peak. That is not a minor adjustment. That is a massive liquidation of the buffer that allowed paper markets to function. At current deficit rates, the remaining inventory runway is measured in years, not decades. And the factors driving demand are not slowing down. They are accelerating. Start with solar panels. 15 years ago, solar energy was a niche application. Photovoltaic installations existed but represented a tiny fraction of global electricity generation. Silver demand from the solar industry was modest. That changed completely. In 2014, solar panels accounted for 11% of industrial silver demand. By 2024, that share had grown to 29%. The absolute numbers tell an even more dramatic story. Solar consumed 54 million ounces of silver in 2014. In 2024, that figure reached 197 million ounces, nearly 4 times as much silver flowing into a single application in just 10 years. And the growth is not stopping. The International Energy Agency projects that global solar capacity will expand by 3,000 to 4,000 gigawatts by 2030. Every gigawatt of new capacity requires silver for the photovoltaic cells that convert sunlight into electricity. Silver is not optional in this process. The metal's electrical conductivity is unmatched. Engineers have experimented with alternatives like copper plating, but reliability and efficiency suffer. For high-performance solar cells, silver remains irreplaceable. The latest generation of solar technology actually increases silver consumption per unit rather than reducing it. Older cell designs used roughly 7 to 10 milligrams of silver per watt of capacity. Newer high-efficiency designs like TOPCon use 13 to 17 milligrams per watt. The most advanced heterojunction cells require over 20 milligrams per watt. As solar manufacturers chase higher efficiency to remain competitive, they use more silver per panel, not less. Technological progress is making the shortage worse, not better. Now consider electric vehicles. A traditional gasoline-powered car contains 15 to 28 grams of silver. The metal goes into electrical contacts, switches, and various electronic components. It is a meaningful amount, but not enormous. A standard battery electric vehicle uses 25 to 50 grams of silver. The increase comes from high-voltage battery management systems, charging infrastructure interfaces, and the expanded electronics required to control an electric drivetrain. That 70 to 80% increase in silver consumption per vehicle matters when you consider the scale of the transition underway. Global automobile production runs around 80 million vehicles per year. As electric vehicles capture a larger share of that production, silver demand from the automotive sector rises correspondingly. Industry forecasts project that electric vehicles will overtake internal combustion engines as the primary source of automotive silver demand by 2027. By 2031, electric vehicles could account for nearly 60% of all automotive silver consumption. But those projections assume current battery technology. They do not account for what is coming next. Samsung recently confirmed mass production of solid-state batteries. This is a technology that battery researchers have pursued for decades. Solid-state batteries offer higher energy density, faster charging, longer lifespan, and improved safety compared to current lithium-ion designs. The automotive industry is salivating over the specifications. 600 miles of range, 20-year battery life, 9-minute charging time. These numbers transform the economics of electric vehicles and eliminate many of the concerns that have slowed adoption. Here's the problem. Samsung's solid-state battery design uses a silver-carbon composite layer for the anode. This layer prevents dendrite formation, which is the main failure mode that has plagued solid-state battery development for years. Silver solves a critical engineering challenge. It also creates a critical supply challenge. According to technical specifications, the new battery architecture requires approximately 1 kilogram of silver per 100 kilowatt-hour battery pack. A typical electric vehicle battery falls in that range, 1 kilogram, 1,000 grams per vehicle. Compare that to the 25 to 50 grams in current electric vehicles. Solid-state technology increases silver consumption per vehicle by a factor of 20 to 40. Run the numbers on what happens if solid-state batteries capture even a fraction of the automotive market. 80 million vehicles produced globally per year. Assume solid-state technology reaches 20% market penetration over the next decade. That is 16 million vehicles annually, each requiring 1 kilogram of silver, 16 million kilograms, roughly 514 million ounces per year, just from automotive batteries. Current total global silver mine production is 835 million ounces annually. Solid-state batteries at 20% market penetration would consume more than 60% of global mine output. This leaves nothing for solar panels, nothing for electronics, nothing for medical devices, nothing for investment demand, nothing for any other use, and that 20% penetration figure is conservative. If the technology works as promised, adoption could accelerate far faster. Every major automaker wants solid-state batteries. They represent the next generation of electric vehicle technology. Manufacturers who cannot secure silver supply will find themselves unable to compete. Samsung executives understand the implications. Reports indicate they have dispatched procurement teams to mine sites in Mexico, bypassing commodity exchanges entirely. They are offering $80 per ounce for silver that is still underground, unmined, unrefined. They are locking up supply years in advance because they know the open market cannot deliver what they need. When one of the world's largest technology companies starts flying private jets to remote mining operations to negotiate directly with producers, it tells you everything about how tight supply has become. Solar and electric vehicles are the largest industrial demand drivers, but they are not alone. Data centers have emerged as a significant and rapidly growing source of silver consumption. Artificial intelligence requires massive computing infrastructure. The servers that train large language models and run inference workloads consume enormous amounts of electricity and require sophisticated electronics. Silver goes into connectors, switches, thermal management systems, and countless other components. The Silver Institute estimates that global information technology power capacity increased by over 5,000% since 2000, from under 1 gigawatt to nearly 50 gigawatts. Every increment of that expansion required silver for the underlying hardware. Governments worldwide are prioritizing data center construction as critical infrastructure. The United States, the European Union, and China are all racing to expand capacity to support AI development. Every new data center that comes online adds incremental silver demand. There is no scenario where AI adoption slows down. The technology is transforming every industry. The infrastructure build-out will continue for years, and silver will remain a required input. Then there is military demand. This is the category nobody talks about because precise data does not exist in the public domain. Military procurement is classified. Exact silver content in weapon systems is not disclosed. But the available information suggests military consumption is far larger than most analysts acknowledge. Consider a single example, the Tomahawk cruise missile. This weapon has become a centerpiece of American military power projection. Launched from ships and submarines, Tomahawks can strike targets over 1,000 miles away with precision guidance. They have been used extensively in conflicts from the Gulf War through ongoing operations in the Middle East. Each Tomahawk contains approximately 500 ounces of silver, 15.5 kilograms. The metal goes into guidance systems, electronics, and specialized circuits that allow the missile to navigate terrain and hit its target. When a Tomahawk detonates, that silver is destroyed, vaporized by the explosion. Scattered into particles too small to recover, every missile fired is silver permanently removed from existence. The United States military has fired thousands of Tomahawks over the past 3 decades. Each launch consumed 500 ounces. The cumulative total runs into the millions of ounces. And Tomahawks are just one weapon system. The F-35 fighter jet contains over 20 kilograms of silver in its avionics and electronic warfare systems. Advanced radar installations use silver. Satellite systems use silver. Night vision equipment uses silver. Secure communications devices use silver. Virtually every sophisticated military technology relies on the metal's conductivity and resistance to corrosion. Global military spending reached $2.7 trillion in 2024. That figure rose 9% from the previous year. Defense budgets are expanding worldwide as geopolitical tensions increase. Every dollar of increased military spending translates to increased demand for the materials that go into military hardware. Silver is one of those materials. The Pentagon does not disclose how much silver it consumes, but informed estimates suggest military applications absorb several million ounces annually, possibly much more. Military buyers are what economists call inelastic purchasers. They do not reduce consumption when prices rise. National security requirements override cost considerations. If the Pentagon needs silver for missile guidance systems, it will pay whatever the market demands. This creates competition between military procurement and civilian industrial users. Both need the same limited supply. Both are willing to pay premium prices. The competition bids up prices for everyone. Now step back and look at the full picture. Solar panels, electric vehicles, solid-state batteries, data centers, artificial intelligence infrastructure, military applications, medical devices, electronics manufacturing, traditional industrial uses. Every one of these demand sources is growing. Most are growing rapidly. Some face exponential expansion curves that will multiply consumption many times over within the next decade. Meanwhile, on the supply side, global mine production peaked in 2016. Output has declined since then, despite rising prices. New mines take 8 to 12 years to develop from discovery to production. Ore grades at existing operations are falling as the richest deposits get depleted. And here is the structural problem that makes silver fundamentally different from most commodities. 71% of mined silver comes as a byproduct of other mining operations. Copper mines produce silver. Lead and zinc mines produce silver. Gold mines produce silver. Only about 30% of silver production comes from dedicated silver mines. This means silver supply does not respond normally to price signals. When silver prices rise, you cannot simply open more silver mines to capture the opportunity. Most silver production is tied to the economics of other metals. Copper miners make decisions based on copper prices. If copper economics do not justify expansion, silver output stays flat regardless of how high silver prices climb. The inelasticity of silver supply meets the inelasticity of industrial demand. Buyers must have the metal regardless of price. Producers cannot easily increase output regardless of price. The result is a market where shortages persist and intensify rather than self-correcting through normal economic mechanisms. We are not running out of silver in the geological sense. The metal exists in the Earth's crust, but we are running out of silver that can be extracted at current prices using current technology within current timeframes. The deficit is real. The inventory drawdown is real. The demand growth is real. The supply constraints are real. And the people who understood this years ago positioned themselves accordingly. Everything I have described so far, the supply deficits, the inventory drawdowns, the exploding industrial demand, none of this is secret information. The data exists in public reports. Industry analysts have been publishing warnings for years. Anyone who cared to look could see the trajectory. So here is the question you should be asking. If the shortage was visible years in advance, who saw it coming? And what did they do about it? The answer reveals something about how financial markets actually work that should make you deeply uncomfortable. Start with the history. For 4 decades, a small group of large banks dominated silver trading on futures exchanges. Names you recognize: JP Morgan, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Scotiabank. These institutions operated trading desks that took massive positions in precious metals markets. For most of that 4-decade period, those positions pointed in one direction: short. Shorting means betting that prices will fall. You sell something you do not own, planning to buy it back later at a lower price. If silver drops from $30 to $25, a short seller pockets the $5 difference. The major banks maintained enormous short positions in silver for years. The concentrated nature of these positions drew scrutiny from regulators and accusations from market observers who believed the banks were deliberately suppressing prices. In 2020, JP Morgan paid $920 million to settle federal charges related to manipulating precious metals markets. Traders at the bank had engaged in a practice called spoofing, placing orders they intended to cancel to create false impressions of supply and demand. The settlement covered conduct spanning from 2008 to 2016. Several traders received prison sentences. $920 million. Federal criminal charges. Traders sent to prison. This was not speculation about manipulation. This was prosecuted and settled manipulation with documented evidence and admitted wrongdoing. The settlement did not end bank involvement in silver markets. It merely established that manipulation had occurred and extracted a financial penalty. Trading continued. Positions continued. The banks remained dominant players. But something changed. Throughout 2025, analysts tracking bank participation reports noticed a shift. The data released by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission does not identify specific banks by name. It aggregates positions into categories. But experienced observers can make educated inferences based on position sizes and trading patterns. What they observed was unprecedented. The concentrated short positions that had characterized bank involvement in silver for decades began unwinding. Net short exposure declined month after month. By late 2025, reports emerged suggesting that the major banks had not merely reduced their shorts, but had flipped entirely to the long side. Let me be clear about the limitations of this information. The CFTC does not publish bank-specific positions. No institution publicly confirms its trading book. The reports you see claiming JP Morgan holds a specific number of ounces are reconstructions based on available data, not verified disclosures. But the aggregate data tells a story even if individual details remain unconfirmed. Commercial traders as a category shifted from net short to net long in silver futures. This represents a historic reversal. For as long as anyone can remember, commercial traders, the category that includes banks, have been net short silver. That positioning defined the market structure. Now it has inverted. One widely circulated analysis claimed JP Morgan unwound a 200 million ounce short position and accumulated 750 million ounces of physical silver, the largest stockpile in history. If accurate, this would represent a position valued at over $40 billion at current prices. I cannot independently verify those specific numbers. Neither can anyone else outside the bank's trading desk, but the directional shift is supported by observable market data. The banks that spent decades betting against silver are no longer betting against silver. Think about what this means. These institutions have access to information and analysis that retail investors cannot match. They employ armies of researchers. They have relationships with miners, refiners, and industrial users. They see order flow that reveals what major buyers and sellers are doing. When banks that profited for decades by shorting silver suddenly reverse course, it signals a fundamental reassessment of market conditions. They see something that changed their conviction from bearish to bullish. That something is the structural shortage I have been describing. The banks read the same supply and demand projections available to anyone. They understood that solar consumption was exploding. They saw the electric vehicle transition accelerating. They tracked inventory drawdowns at exchanges and vault facilities. They recognized that the math was turning against short sellers, and they acted on that recognition. But here is where the story takes a darker turn. Unwinding a 200 million ounce short position is not simple. You cannot just close out contracts without moving the market dramatically against yourself. The act of buying to cover shorts drives prices higher, which increases your losses on the remaining short exposure. Banks needed an exit strategy that minimized their pain, and according to some market observers, they found one. They transferred their short exposure to other institutions. Think of it as a game of hot potato with a bomb. The banks holding shorts needed to pass them to someone else before the explosion. They found willing counterparties, foreign banks hungry for yield, institutions that did not understand what they were buying, traders who saw an opportunity without recognizing the risk. The short positions did not disappear. They moved from informed hands to less informed hands, from institutions that recognized the danger to institutions that remained blind to it. If this account is accurate, and I acknowledge it relies on analysis rather than confirmed documentation, the major American banks executed one of the largest risk transfers in commodity market history. They handed a nuclear bomb to counterparties who thought they were receiving a gift. Now look at what happened over the Christmas holiday. On December 26, 2025, the New York Federal Reserve conducted emergency repo operations. Repo is short for repurchase agreement. It is a mechanism through which banks can obtain short-term cash by pledging securities as collateral. The Fed lends money, takes collateral, and the bank agrees to repurchase the securities later at a slightly higher price. Repo operations are routine. They happen daily to manage liquidity in the banking system. What was not routine was the scale. The December 26th operation provided $17.2 billion in emergency liquidity. That was followed by additional injections, pushing total holiday period lending above $34 billion. Mainstream financial media reported these operations without much fanfare. Routine liquidity management during a holiday period with thin trading, nothing to worry about. Other observers drew different conclusions. Investigative reporting by DC Report documented what they characterized as unusual patterns in Federal Reserve lending facilities. Their analysis suggested that emergency cash was flowing to institutions facing acute stress rather than routine liquidity needs. The timing aligned precisely with silver's surge past $80 per ounce. The timing aligned with margin calls that would have devastated any institution holding significant short exposure. The timing aligned with reports of forced liquidations at trading desks around the world. Correlation does not prove causation. The Fed conducts repo operations for many reasons, but the coincidence is striking. Here's what we know for certain. Silver prices surged nearly 145% year over year by late December 2025. Any institution that entered the year with substantial short exposure faced catastrophic losses. A short seller who sold silver at $30 per ounce in early 2025 and held that position through December faced a loss of over $50 per ounce. On a position of 100 million ounces, that translates to a $5 billion loss. On 200 million ounces, $10 billion. These are not theoretical calculations. These are the mathematics of what happens when prices triple and you're on the wrong side. The question is, which institutions absorb those losses? Some evidence has emerged. In Rajkot, India, 44 silver trading firms declared insolvency in recent weeks. Their combined liabilities approached $425 million. These were not small-time speculators. These were established trading houses that had operated for years or decades. What destroyed them? The CME margin hikes. When the exchange raised silver margins by 47% on January 7th, traders holding leveraged positions faced immediate demands for additional collateral. Those who could not meet the margin calls faced forced liquidation. Their positions were closed at market prices, crystallizing losses. The Indian firms held paper positions. They were playing the futures game, betting on price movements without necessarily holding physical metal. When the rules changed overnight, they found themselves on the wrong side of a margin squeeze with no escape. This is what happens when a paper market disconnects from physical reality. The exchange changes the rules to protect itself. Traders caught in the gears get crushed. Reports of similar stress have emerged from Europe and Canada. Bank trading desks facing margin pressure. Emergency meetings in the days between Christmas and New Year. Executives who had not slept in 36 hours trying to figure out how to manage positions that had moved catastrophically against them. None of the major global banks have publicly confirmed trading losses from silver. They will not confirm such losses until required to do so in quarterly earnings reports, if then. Financial institutions have considerable discretion in how they characterize trading results, but the circumstantial evidence suggests significant pain somewhere in the system. The Federal Reserve does not inject tens of billions in emergency liquidity because everything is fine. Exchanges do not raise margins by 47% because markets are functioning normally. Trading firms do not declare insolvency in clusters because prices moved in an orderly fashion. Something broke. The question is, how badly and for whom? Now return to the bank position reversal and consider its implications. If the major American banks successfully transferred their short exposure to foreign institutions before silver tripled, they accomplished something remarkable. They escaped a trap of their own making and left others to suffer the consequences. More than that, if they flipped to long positions, they are now profiting from the same price surge that is destroying their former counterparties. The banks that suppressed silver for decades, that paid nearly $1 billion in manipulation settlements, that sent traders to prison for rigging markets, those banks may now be the largest beneficiaries of silver's historic rally. They saw the shortage coming. They positioned for it. They found victims to absorb the losses they would have otherwise suffered. And they are watching their competitors drown while counting profits that will fund bonuses for years. This is not how markets are supposed to work. The institutions with the most information, the most resources, and the closest relationships with regulators use those advantages to transfer risk onto less sophisticated players. Whether this constitutes illegal behavior, I cannot say. The line between sophisticated trading and market manipulation is not always clear. What looks like fraud to an outsider might be characterized as legitimate risk management by those involved. But the outcome speaks for itself. The smart money exited short positions and went long. The less informed money absorbed the shorts and got obliterated. Wealth transferred from the uninformed to the informed on a scale measured in billions of dollars. And the people, left holding worthless paper promises, are only now beginning to understand what happened to them. There is an old saying in trading: if you have been in a poker game for 30 minutes and you do not know who the patsy is, you are the patsy. The foreign banks and trading firms that took the other side of positions from JP Morgan and its peers did not know they were the patsies. They thought they saw an opportunity. They thought they understood the trade. They were wrong. And they are paying for being wrong with their existence. Meanwhile, the institutions that engineered this outcome continue operating. They will report record profits. Their executives will receive bonuses. Their shareholders will celebrate gains. The system worked exactly as designed, just not for everyone. Everything I have told you comes down to one simple reality. The price on your screen is not the price of silver. It is the price of a paper contract in a system that is failing. The real price is what buyers actually pay to hold metal in their hands. That price is $30 to $60 higher, depending on where you live. This gap will not close by physical prices falling to meet paper. It will close by paper prices rising to meet physical, or by the paper market becoming so irrelevant that nobody references it anymore. If you own physical silver right now, understand what you hold. You own what Samsung needs for solid-state batteries. You own what solar manufacturers need for panels. You own what Tesla needs for vehicle electronics. You own what the Pentagon needs for missile guidance systems. You own what AI data centers need for server infrastructure. These buyers are not optional participants. They need silver the way your body needs oxygen. They will pay whatever it costs to secure supply because the alternative is shutting down operations. You are not a speculator hoping prices rise. You are holding a strategic asset in a supply crisis with no near-term solution. Do not let paper prices convince you to sell. The institutions that suppressed silver for decades have flipped long. They want your metal. They need your metal. Every ounce you sell at artificially low paper prices flows into the vaults of people who understand exactly what is happening. The deficit is real. The inventory drawdown is real. The demand explosion is real. The supply constraints are real. This is not a bubble driven by speculation. This is a fundamental repricing of an irreplaceable industrial commodity that the world cannot function without. The smart money positioned years ago. Now you know what they knew. 5 years of deficits, 820 million ounces drained from inventories. China locking down 60 to 70% of refined supply. Solar demand quadrupling in a decade. Solid-state batteries threatening to consume more silver than the entire world currently mines. The banks saw it. They reversed positions. They transferred risk to less informed players. They are now long the metal they spent 40 years suppressing. The exchanges see it. They raised margins 47% in a single day. They are changing the rules because the old rules lead to outcomes they cannot survive. The manufacturers see it. Samsung is landing private jets at mine sites, offering $80 for unmined ore. They are bypassing exchanges entirely because exchanges cannot deliver. The military sees it. Every missile, every fighter jet, every satellite requires silver that cannot be substituted. The paper market is dying. What replaces it is a physical market where real metal commands real premiums and paper promises become worthless. You now know what is happening. You know why it is happening. You know who positioned correctly and who got destroyed. The question is what you do with this information. The window to act at current prices will not stay open. It never does. Silver traded as money for 5,000 years before paper currencies existed. It powered empires. It built civilizations. It enabled the Industrial Revolution. Now it powers the technologies that will define the century. The world is remembering what silver actually is. The only question is whether you remember in time.